Hello everyone, my name is Ray and welcome back to day 9 of continuous health and wellness. In this particular segment, I'd like to reiterate a point that I've made several times, which is that our food can and oftentimes does become our mood. How is this possible? Well, a lot of times foods have different chemical traits that you might not really think of in a nutritional way because some of these contents aren't listed on the back of the packaging. For an example, let's say that we're continuously consuming meats that are raised in certain conditions that aren't really suitable for the wellness and health of whatever it is that we're about to procure. In other words, let's say that you have an animal that's being raised in fear. Some of those hormones will translate directly into the nutrients that carry through in the content of the food itself. So if we're continuously eating discounted foods that are raised at a level that basically is transmitting fear and illness, essentially, a lot of times we can introduce those types of characteristics into our own being. So a lot of times to reset this type of agitation, I wanted to call it hostility, agitation, all we have to do is change what it is that we're ingesting and what we're subscribing to. What I subscribe to is a little bit different from the mainstream. In fact, a lot of people will be listening to what I'm saying, but judging what they're seeing in front of them. So if you're listening to this without watching the video and you're doing that just to hear the message, kudos to you. And if you're listening to this and just kind of watching it and saying, you know, what's this crazy guy going to say next? Well, the main thing I want to say is it's January 19th. Happy birthday to my friend who has a birthday today and to anyone else who has a birthday today. And I'm starting out my celebration of your day by having some blueberries to break my fast. So blueberries, it's something that I've shown before at this very workstation. Many of you have seen me throughout time talking about these little beneficial bombs, bursts of nutrients. And I've got to say, these are the #1 component to my own health and well-being. They taste good. They're hydrating. And they don't appear to have been raised in fear or with any kind of illness or discontent that caused them any kind of reconsideration as far as what their value in life was going to be. So, and I appreciate them. Now, it doesn't matter how our food was raised. If we're not appreciating it, if we're just eating it without really focusing on what it is that we've been gifted with, then we're just kind of entitled. And there's been a lot of talk of entitlement during this already past year. Thank God that year passed, right? Well, what next? What is this year bringing so far? Today's, again, it's January the 19th. I know that there's going to be an upcoming shift in power. And maybe the shift will be different from what any of us anticipated. But when it comes down to it, as we are in these areas where we have the power to make choices, the free choice that we make will oftentimes lead to the next opportunity that arises in our life. What does that mean? Well, today I had an interesting conversation. I say conversation, it's funny because many of us are conversing just in typed formats online without really talking to one another and really feeling the heart space of one another. And these kind of conversations are often broken and manipulated to whatever end result that the recipient wants to receive. So that's why I say when you're looking at this video, if you're looking at it with visuals, you might be seeing things and making assumptions and judgments based on what I have surrounded myself with. In my mind, I've surrounded myself with art and beauty and order. There are certain things that are out of order, and there are certain things that may go against some of the imagery input that has been taught to us by different teachings. And at the same time, some of those teachings are only partially taught to us. So I'm not trying to short any of the thoughts that anyone's having in terms of when they're judging what they're seeing in my surroundings, but I try to make an impression. Green is the new black. Now, being in the black and being profitable and also being stylish are things that black is associated with. There are many other things that it's associated with as well, and depending on levels of impression and levels of teaching, that's going to determine which directions our minds go into. Now, that's where I get back to the food concept and what I'm talking about. If we're eating fear-based and ill-raised foods, a lot of times our mind is going to be agitated in that same way. Whether or not we believe it, it's something that I believe is true, not only because I've heard so many other people talking about it, but because I've accepted responsibility that what I eat is what I am. We are what we eat, right? So, as I've said in the first segments here, I hadn't been eating the way that I really had anticipated that I would for an extended stretch of time. I got kind of caught up in the curbside services that exist all throughout our generous nation. Our nation has a bounty that we're not really always sharing with one another in the way that we could share if we were all a little bit more productive and a little bit more focused on what it is that we bring to the table. So in today's segment, what I'm trying to bring to the table in my own way by raising the very items that I'm consuming is conservation. Conservation is a form of wellness that will drive a thought process of responsibility. I recognize that when I get these blueberries, they come in plastic containers. This has been pointed out to me on numerous occasions. I recognize that. We currently have a recycling program where we toss these into that bin and hope that they'll be recycled. In addition to that, I try to forgo the things that do come with plastic containers, but in this particular era, in this nation that I was born into, to bring certain things to attention to others, it's very difficult to make any kind of leeway without our fathers, without our parents participating in ways that make sense. By that, what I mean is, if I, for an example, were to invite people to go to a national park, and if the people that I invite bring pallets of plastic bottled substances, these illnesses that we're bringing into that area are things that can be errantly discarded into that area or that carry back with us into our own landfills. And I say landfills because I don't think a lot of everything that we're bringing back is being recycled, even though we toss it in the recycle bin. So in my particular main homestead, what I'm doing is raising tomatoes and anything else that'll fruit. Tomatoes have been one of the most successful and bountiful crops that I've planted. And even during these cold temperatures, and in fact, in a lot of times, in a lot of ways, because of the cold temperatures, the fruits that these plants are producing tastes even better. And I believe that that's because the plants are less heat stressed. And when they're less heat stressed, it's possible that the fruit tastes that much more delicious. So these blueberries are pretty excellent, but I'll tell you what, they don't taste the same as blueberries straight off the vine like I had in in Denali National Park. In Glacier, I had raspberries, and in Yellowstone, I've had raspberries off the vine. And even in a local state park, Brazos Bend State Park, there are raspberries that grow wild on the vine. Regionally, these items taste different. That kind of is the same for all of our foods because the different soil content puts different minerals into those foods that we're able to choose from. So these blueberries have some content in them. I can taste that it doesn't seem like it's from here. Sometimes you can taste the quality of the water in these items. These are very good. I'm happy for that, and I'm going to continue to eat blueberries right now. Raspberries have been a little bit sweeter to me lately. Again, location is everything. But when it comes down to it, the main reason I'm talking about food and how it impacts our mood is because if you've been following along and listening to this conversation and you keep tuning out and tuning back in on key elements just to hear what I'm saying, eventually some of that information is going to transpire in a way that inspires you to consider that what I'm saying is possibly more important than those plastic bottled pills that we're taking to mask the symptoms. It's a double mask, right? Because we're already masking up for all of the other things that we interact with one another. But those bottled pills that we take to mask the symptoms of whatever illness that we're subscribing to are things that we can change and shortcut. And we'll talk about those things in a different segment. I wrote a song that has to do with taking different pills and how it can lead to our downfall, really. It's called Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Speak No Evil. And in one of the lines it says you didn't need another pill. And the reason I had written that song is because I'd heard recently from a person, a close person in the family, that one of their friends had either had an incident where they wound up in the ER and or passed away due to abuse of prescription pills. These prescription pills are things that we're more likely to grab for and never think about the plastic that it also comes in. Instead, we only think that it was good because a doctor prescribed it to us. Well, what about blueberries? What about someone walking around saying, hey, when you eat different food, that'll reduce your cholesterol? What about someone who says that you've got to look at the numbers needed to treat, for an example, in cholesterol medication to determine, is it really beneficial to follow this course of treatment, or is it more beneficial to go with the alternative? I don't know about everyone else, but a lot of what choices I'm making are not fear-based. You can see imagery all around me that some people might take as questionable. And those questionable thoughts are fear-based. Now, whether or not I have this guitar with occult-inspired graphics on it, or this particular occult-inspired poster, or even this artwork, which is a representation of nature, whether I play my guitars and make music that was inspired from words that who knows where they came from. The fact is that we were all put on this planet to learn with one another, and maybe we even chose to be on this planet to learn with one another, hoping to gain that level of acceptance from one another. The interesting thing is, until we accept ourselves, we really can't convey that feeling of acceptance to others in a way where they'll accept our genuine recipe for success. I was going to say something else, but there's not really anything else or any other way to say it. What we eat is challenging some of the very fabric of the conversations that we have with one another. And I know this is true because the more people I talk with and the more that I go out of my way to engage with people, the more I can see when people are following a path that they're able to believe in themselves, really, versus when they feel weak and almost powerless because all the power is something that's being bestowed to them by others and balanced in this checkbooks and balances way, where it's like, I don't know if I'm going to have enough to do what it is that I need to do, or to give to someone else in a way where it's meaningful to them, or to persist. And those thoughts of fear will cause us many unlikely, agitated responses which are fear-driven. So if I'm eating a lot of fear-based foods and I have a whole different physique and I don't feel strong, when I go out into the general public, whether or not I have a mask on, I know these masks don't block every particle in the world. If I have a mask on and I don't believe that I'm going to be protected from that strength of health that I've been ingesting, it's possible that whatever I've been consuming will begin to resonate, whatever it is, whatever doubts that I feel. Have you ever had a project that you're working on and you start to feel doubts about the project, and then one doubt leads to another, and all these chain reaction events happen and things are postponed inevitably back down to the foundation, where you have to rip everything apart to rebuild it in a way that's sustainable, that's going to stand the test of time? In a way, I believe that's what we're all doing. No matter what creator you think you believe in, I'm not arguing with you. I'm only going to suggest maybe we are all part of that same picture. And if we're all part of that same picture, then we are in fact trying to tear everything down to the foundation so that only goodness, persistence, resilience, and nurturing power is raised up and will energize one another so that we can endure whatever comes next during this year or any other year, and during this era or any other era that we may or may not have ever been born into. Some of us who are watching this right now, thank God that you had all of the time to watch this. That's a lot of time that you spent, that you had available to you. I absolutely appreciate that you spent that time with me watching this for right now. It means a lot. It means a lot because I know that somehow you're listening so that you can hear these messages of inspiration. And I know that you're also watching me evolve the same way that I'm watching you evolve. Right now we have this fortunate social media circumstance where we can see each other and share tips, actionable tips with one another that help us to all succeed during these challenging times. During these challenging times, I'd like to encourage you that our food does, in fact, equate to our mood. And I challenge you, anytime you break your fast, anytime you go for breakfast, to consider having something fresh, something straight out of nature. Imagine that this stuff that came out of nature, even the packaging itself that brought this morsel of goodness to me, came from the source creator, from God, if you will. And I'll tell you, came from God. I'll call it God for now. And I'll call him God. However you want to recognize what I'm talking about is basically up to you. The words that I use are the words that I was raised with. In other words, I might speak entirely different from you. I might know entire volumes of knowledge and experience that are completely different from you. So I might fancy myself as intelligent and powerful. It's not until I recognize that I only have a part of the picture and that someone else has that same power but in a different capacity. Someone else who doesn't know how to write rhymes, someone else who doesn't know how to play music, someone else who doesn't know how to build websites, someone else who doesn't know how to work on cars. They'll know how to do other things. They'll know how to physically treat manifestations of ill health. They'll know how to physically arrange a system that'll allow the construction of a home. They'll know things that I don't know. And I'm saying that just in a generalized way. In other words, we all know different things. We all have our own superpowers. But until we recognize that in one another, or more importantly inside of ourselves, we can't express those superpowers strongly enough to have other people stop and look and go, wow, that person's really amazing. And so what I'm trying to inspire for you is to recognize how amazing you are. The quilting that you do, the programming that you do, the system programming, the engineering that you do, the photographs that you take, the everything that anyone has ever done or shown, the imagery and videos that you share, all of these things are things of amazement that I am absolutely impressed by when I see your work. So it's not until I see a lot of posts where it's just division that make me feel like, well, I'm kind of saying words into an ether that are falling on deaf ears. But at the same time, I recognize that not everyone is ready to wake up at the same time, and we're all learning our own individual lessons. So I have no qualms about where anyone is in their state of life. The only thing I ask is, if you disagree with what I'm saying, please don't try to vilify me and slander me in ways that don't make sense. I've seen entire segments of friends disappear, and I'm not quite sure why. I've seen a lot of talk offline because I've been in different private forums for a long time. I've been given the responsibility to participate in private forums that are within forums that some of us are on. And in these private forums, you'll see a lot of banter back and forth, speculation, but you'll never see the invite asking that person that's being talked about to say what it is that they've gone through that caused them to make the decisions that they made. So we cannot rightfully judge one another for the things that we don't even know that we're going through. Does that make sense? I hope you're having some breakfast too. These blueberries are divine. It's one of my favorite superfoods. They always quench my thirst, and they make me smile. So the things that make you smile are things that you should gravitate to. The things that cause you duress are things that you might want to consider refining and maybe checking out of, because there's always an alternative. There's an alternative to this, to the fruits and berries and nuts and vegetables that I'm talking about. The alternatives are many, but you can't help but recognize when we have to mask what it is that's happening with a mask, with a charade. We cannot help but recognize it when we're masking our illnesses with prescription bottles, when in fact we could be addressing the issues right at the source. And by that, what I mean is, when you have a point of conflict, any kind of obstacle that you're trying to overlook or to work through, what you want to do is fuel yourself with what it takes to succeed in terms of making it through that obstacle. How many of you have a New Year's resolution to lose weight or to get in shape or whatever you want to call it? Well, let me be the first to invite you again to reconsider that food is mood, health is wealth, and those things that we consume are the things that we become. And we consume things in a variety of ways. We consume things in a multiplicity of ways. Even the very feelings that someone gives to me when they send a message, and maybe errantly had a question, and they in a roundabout went and got their answer in a roundabout way, and they never came back and said thank you. Those things it's very telling when someone just wants a piece of information from you, but not you necessarily. And that's, in a lot of ways, that's what we think about when we think about reverence and accepting responsibility. In a lot of ways, we only want a piece, just that one piece. But maybe we don't want to have all the rest of the piety that it takes. And it's not really piety when we look at one another and consider that each of us are created by something as wonderful as whatever created us. And that doesn't necessarily just mean our fathers and our mothers, even though our parents are wonderful. They went through their own challenges just like we did. So on all of that, I hope you're having a great day. Thanks again for joining me for day 9. Please be sure to subscribe to what it is that you're watching here. Share the content if you find that it's inspirational. It really helps me. What I'm trying to do is bring attention to the wellness and conservation of all of our resources, just based on a fundamental underpinning of insight, foundational insight that would allow all of us to make choices that are just a little bit better. If I begin to go to the store and find blueberries that don't come in one-time use plastic packaging, and I instead find places where we can bring our own containers that have been properly sterilized, or maybe it's like here in San Antonio we have a company called Sodexo that provides all the plates to the corporation and cutlery, and some of that stuff is just run through the washing system, sterilization system. If we had something like that, because I know in this city of San Antonio we have a recycling program where I'm putting these in a bin. If we had all of that recycling content sorted so that maybe these items went right back to the manufacturer and were able to be repurposed after being sterilized, some of that would be monumental changes that would be actionable votes that would really speak on the behalf of wellness and conservation, if only it existed. If only someone had a platform that was big enough to talk about that. Well, here, thank God, on YouTube, I currently have the freedom to say these things. However, my message is not quite carried far enough yet in a way that's meaningful or that resonates. So I'm going to continue writing songs. I'm going to continue doing my best to sing with joy about these topics that I'm bringing to you. And I'm going to continue to try to plant these seeds of wellness, because it was not until I heard the good news that I was able to bring myself into a turnabout that made sense. So my about face happened not while I was in the JROTC. My about face happened when I accepted responsibility. You can be conditioned to follow orders and to run under the guise of leadership for a lifetime. That's what our fathers have been doing in many cases. Or you can actually accept responsibility for yourself. And then it doesn't matter what the law is, you'll follow a peaceful way. And again, food equals mood. If you're eating peaceful, then you're going to recognize that you have a choice. And peace isn't the only way. It just happens to be one of the ways. I'm not the only peacemaker out there, as I was accused of trying to be. I'm just a form of peacemaker. I still have the same tendencies and thoughts that most people have. We're very primal beings. There's an operating system up there. And we were all, many of us, programmed in ways that help us to avoid conversation. So I hope I've helped you to acknowledge that there is a conversation to be had. In order to recognize and overcome any kind of problem, we first have to recognize that there is a problem, and then we have to act based on those insights. So once we start to act based on those insights, some of the insight that's out